G'day, today I'm going to show you how easy it is to install in-vehicle winch controls. Now about the hardest part for me was deciding where to mount my switches. The great thing about this setup is that you can still use your wired or wireless remote directly into your winch control box. And everything you need should cost you less than 50 bucks. Even if you opt for the upmarket fancy gear, it'll cost you way less than 100. The first thing you'll need is an isolator switch. It's a good idea to get one with a cover so you can't accidentally knock it. Then you'll need a momentary in-out switch for the winch itself. You could use something basic like these, or you could go upmarket. You could even use two momentary switches, one for in and one for out, to make it cheaper. The next thing you'll need is a length of 4-core cable. Now, if you're not using a switch that lights up, you can get away with using 3-core. About 3 or 4 meters should be enough, but it depends on your vehicle. You'll need some crimp terminals and heat shrink, plus some cable ties and corrugated tubing to keep it neat and tidy. Plus an inline fuse holder with a low amp fuse. I'm using a 5 amp and some electrical tape. In terms of tools, you'll need some crimpers, some side cutters or something to cut your wire and insulation with, plus a couple of screwdrivers and an optional soldering iron, plus a lighter for your heat shrink, and a straightened out coat hanger, which I'm using to help me feed the cable into the vehicle. And I'm using a drill to mount the switches. The first step is to run the 4-core cable from your winch control box into your vehicle to where you want to mount the switches. Use some corrugated tubing and cable ties to make sure it's out of the way and neat and tidy. I've run the wire through these tricky areas so I know it's going to work. Then I remove it a little bit and add the corrugated tubing. Now when you pull the wire back through, it'll take the tubing with it. Take the opportunity to tidy the wiring up and cable tie it as you go. Now to get it through the firewall, tape the very end of the cable to a coat hanger, poke it through a rubber grommet in your firewall, and then pull it from the inside. Once it's pulled all the way through with the corrugated tubing, you can start running that under your dash. Now I've decided to mount the switches onto this panel here, which is going to involve running the wiring behind the dash and under this trim piece. So the next step is to remove this. I had a blank here in the panel, so it's really simple to mount my momentary switch for the winch in-out. The only other thing I'm going to need to do is drill an M12 hole to mount my isolator. With the switches mounted, the next thing we'll need to work on is the wiring. That's going to involve going back to the front of your vehicle and your winch control box. You'll need to open up your winch control box to access the wiring inside. So first things first, turn off your winch isolator or disconnect the main positive lead so it's not live. Then remove the control box and open it up. With the control box open, it reveals the solenoid and, more importantly, these 4 light-duty wires. We're going to strip this 4-core cable and connect the corresponding colours to the same 4 terminals. Now on the positive, you'll need to add your inline fuse. First, strip back the insulation on the outside cable, making sure you don't go through each individual wire. So this particular 4-core cable has a red, a black, a yellow and a blue wire. I'm going to correspond the blue with the brown and all the other colours match up. These 3 here are going to need a ring terminal to mount up with these, and the red is going to need the inline fuse and then a ring terminal onto here. With the winch control box wired up, reassembled and put back on the vehicle, you can focus on the wiring inside the cab. But before you do that, you can wire up your isolator switch to your winch in-out switch. I'm just using a small offcut of wiring here. You'll need to connect one terminal from your isolator switch to the power in of your momentary switch. That's nice and easy. If you've got a 3-terminal switch like this, it'll be the middle. If you're using a 7-terminal rocker switch like this terminal is your earth, this one here or this one will be your power in, corresponding to this side or this side of the switch. Once it's back in the vehicle, the red wire will go to this terminal and your black earth will go to this terminal. Your yellow will go to this terminal here and the blue will go to this terminal here. Now back inside the vehicle, we need to trim off any excess cable and then strip down the wires in preparation for adding the terminals and plugging in the switches. With everything plugged in here, I'm going to put the fuse back in on the control box and connect my winch isolator, then give it a test. Now, if you find that your winch is going the wrong direction when you press the button, you've got to swap the blue and yellow wires on the back of the switch. And if the lights aren't working, you can fix that too. I've pulled the fuse back out and now I can reposition these wires. In my case, I need to swap the blue and yellow, plus I need to move everything to the far side of the switch. The earth stays in the same spot. I've double checked that the switch is working properly, it's lighting up, which means I can put the interior back together, making sure I plug in everything else that I disconnected. The hardest part about this whole install is choosing where to mount your switches and running your cable so it's neat and tidy. The rest is a piece of cake and it really takes your setup to the next level. Now the next time you or your mates are stuck, you can stay in your vehicle and control your winch. How good is that? And of course, your included controller that comes with the winch will still work perfectly fine simply by plugging it in as you usually would. For more 12-volt DIY tips and tricks, make sure you hit like and subscribe. And take a minute to check out the rest of our channel. There's plenty of cooking, camping, and 4-wheel driving videos too. Cheers.